Hello and very welcome to today's online seminar here with the CCMA. Thank you for joining us. Oh, I've got a froggy throat this morning. So hello, I'm Lee Hopwood. I'm the CEO here at the CCMA, and I think what we're going to go through over the next hour or so is going to be some really interesting debate, really interesting information around home working. And I'd really like to thank Sensée for supporting us in today's seminar. So home working is now really critical. It's a really important aspect of work life, especially as we go into more social restrictions and the talk of circuit breakers. And I think we've been here before. We were here 6 months ago, and we've now kind of settled into this home working model, and some organisations are starting to feel the cracks. The hazy days of low absenteeism and high levels of productivity have gone, and so today what we'll hear from is Mark Walton, who is the CEO at Sensée, and he's going to share with us their home working model. Sensée has become renowned for being an organisation that works on 100% home working. So it'll be really interesting to hear about his model. And then we've also got the opportunity to ask him some questions, but also joining him today are his colleague, Rob Smale, who is the Director of Service Delivery and Operations at Sensée. So he'll have some further insight he'll be able to share with us. And we're also really pleased to have with us from Bupa, the Customer Contact Director there, Mark Davies. So really pleased that we've got some people that have been in home working for a long time. They understand some of the challenges that we're all sharing and experiencing right now. And they're here to not only tell their story, but also to answer your questions. So before I invite Mark Walton to join me on screen, if you have any questions, please do use the Q&A functionality within Zoom. We will be monitoring them, and you can probably see that there are people, some questions are already starting to come through. Obviously, I have a load of questions that I want to ask Mark and Rob. However, I'm sure you guys do too. So we're anticipating that we will keep asking those questions until around about 1:15. It may be earlier if we have all the questions asked and answered, but we'll go till about 1:15. So please do use that Q&A functionality. So Mark, thank you very much for joining me. And so Mark, you're CEO at Sensée. You've had a home working model for a long, long time. So please do tell us all about it, and I shall disappear from screen.
That's great. Thanks very much, Lee. Thank you. And welcome, everybody. Good to see so many of you joining us. Just waiting for Lee to give me the opportunity to present my slides there. Lee, I think I need you to stop sharing, if that's okay. Thank you. Okay, so I'm Mark. I'm the CEO of Sensée. Good to see so many of you on this call, this webinar this afternoon. Obviously, it's been a very interesting, to say the least, 7 months now that we've all been doing this. What I wanted to do is just run through and give you a bit of an introduction in terms of who we are as a business, for those of you who don't know us, and just explain really how we've been dealing with this, and tell you a little bit about our story. So in terms of us as a business, we have really been doing home working for about 16 years. So this is what we do. This is our thing. I've spent probably the previous 4 years trying to persuade businesses that home working was a really good idea up until March of this year. And for various different reasons, a lot of organisations were very reluctant to move into home working. Surprisingly, as of April, a lot of organisations moved into it, and it suddenly became a very good idea. So we've got very busy, as you can imagine, over the past 7 months. we help organisations from an outsourced perspective. So most of what we do is outsourcing to and on behalf of our partners, some of which you can see at the bottom of the screen there. And indeed, we've got Mark with us today, who's been Bupa have been a client of ours for about 4 years. So a real good experience, and not just from an outsourced perspective, but good opportunity here from Bupa in terms of how they've also been doing this from an in-house perspective as well. We're not just an outsourcer, we also provide technology. So we have a software as a service division whereby we give people the optimal technologies to enable them to really deliver home working optimally, and not just as a make, do and mend solution, which a lot of organisations have had to do over the past 6-7 months. We also have a consultancy division. So this is helping organisations to understand where home working fits in and where it's going to fit in moving forward. That's both strategically but also operationally. There's a lot of businesses have got some big operational challenges, and we've got Rob Smale on the session today, who heads up all of our consultancy work. Rob's been working with a lot of big brands over the last 12 months to help them to understand their home working journeys and what's the right type of home working for them. So as I mentioned, up until spring of this year, according to Contact Babel's research, we've done a lot of work with, only about 26% of all organisations in the UK were home working. And by April 2020, 84% of all contact centres have moved to a predominantly home working model. So it's been quite dramatic. I think a lot of the reasons that organisations hadn't done that before focused around nervousness of security, information security, data security. But organisations have astonished themselves over the past 6 months in terms of what they've achieved. And I think most of the businesses that you work in will have done an amazing job in terms of getting people up and running at home very, very quickly. We don't think that we need a disaster or a business continuity situation to prove the benefits of home working. So, as I said, we've been extolling the virtues of this for a long time. We think that home working and the incorporation of that within business can offer huge benefits. Clearly around corporate social responsibility, this is a good model for people. A lot of people have already expressed their desire to not necessarily move straight back into a brick and mortar workspace. And we think this offers real benefits for people in terms of an opportunity for more work-life balance, flexible working. We think that this can deliver service improvement. So if you've got a happy workforce, clearly you've got a more engaged workforce, and that engagement comes through in terms of customer satisfaction, customer interaction. This model is brilliant. Home working is brilliant from a flexibility and volatility point of view. So we've seen it from a disaster recovery point of view, and the way we've got everybody up and running and home working very quickly in a way that perhaps business continuity wasn't perceived to exist before. We thought of business continuity as a building going down or a power outage, but this is a new world. If you take that moving forward by having a dispersed workforce, you can also have a much more flexible workforce. So have people available when the customer traffic is there, not just necessarily to fit shift patterns, etc. And in terms of the way that then delivers quality improvements for you and your customers, we've seen, and certainly in our outsourced model, we tend to deliver a higher customer satisfaction, higher net promoter score, higher engagement levels than are typically available from an in-house brick and mortar contact centre. Efficiency, having people there when you need them and not necessarily sitting around when you don't because volumes are lower, obviously feeds into productivity, and that feeds into cost reduction. So whilst we don't think home working provides an opportunity for a low cost model, it certainly does take cost out of the operating model. And some of our clients have seen cost savings through this model of 20, 25, even 30% OPEX reductions. So we've been doing a lot of work with various bodies over the last 6 to 7 months. We've had about 160, 170 of the top FTSE 250 companies on various webinars that we've run ourselves as an organisation, as we've tried to help organisations to understand the process and the period that we're going through. When we asked the question, what's your biggest home working challenge to those businesses, 203 people responded in those big businesses. Interestingly, only 3 of those, and I still don't know which ones they are, but 3 of them said they haven't got any challenges, they've nailed it. The vast majority of organisations are starting to see challenges. What we experienced was, in the first 3 months of lockdown, most organisations did a brilliant job of getting the telephony and some technology up and running, so getting people working from home fundamentally. But certainly through Rob's division of our business, through our consultancy division, what we're now noticing is organisations are starting to say that the cracks are starting to appear slightly, challenges are starting to creep in, the honeymoon period, if you like, is over, and particularly areas you'll see there around pastoral care and motivation. That's where most organisations are starting to notice challenges creeping in, which are affecting things like productivity. So the way that we approach this is through having a virtual mindset. So it's not just about the home workers, or it's not just about the technology that affects the home workers, but it's having a virtual mindset right across all these disciplines within the business. So through HR, recruitment, management, training, all of the IT, of course, how you schedule and plan, how do you think about security, probably most importantly, how you communicate. So communication for us is key, but all of that is as a totality. It's having a virtual mindset to home working that's important for us. As I mentioned before, we are 100% home-based. So we've now got about 1,300 employees in the UK, all working on behalf of some of those blue chip brands that you saw earlier on. They're all fully employed. In our model, we dedicate all of our advisors to each of the clients that they work on behalf of. So Mark's on the call and we'll speak later on, but Bupa have a very high quality and lengthy training program. Clearly the people that come on and are appropriate for that are not appropriate for other things, and they wouldn't want to do that type of work. So it's about having the right person dedicated to the right piece of activity and the right type of activity. We pride ourselves on being a very ethical business. It's been one of the cornerstones of the business since we were founded. We think that by providing a better work-life balance for people and looking after those individuals, they can also look after the other elements within their lives, and gives them a better work-life balance. We fully employ all of our people, so we say no to gig economy and no to 0 hours contracts. And from an environmental point of view, and I think this is going to come out much wider as home working becomes more normal. If you look at an organisation like ours with 1,300 employees, if you compare that to a 1,300 seat brick and mortar operation, our carbon footprint is 90% lower than those organisations. So it means that you've got great opportunities for environmental benefits as well. Flexibility is probably key, and it's probably one of the key reasons that most of our clients work with us. Home working has enabled us to deliver 30-minute scheduling. So we deliver resource on a 30-minute by 30-minute basis. If you've got a really busy spike, hour-long spike throughout the day, it's about being able to match the resource to that spike, but then again, not having people sitting around doing nothing when it's quieter or there's less work to do. Our own advisors, therefore, to meet this requirement, are employed on a 20 to 35 hour working week. So it's a mixture of part-time hours, but again, it's about enabling the hours to suit the advisor's requirements. Any less than 20 hours, we think, doesn't enable people to keep up to speed, to keep engaged, and to keep fully in the swing of what's going on. But that's how we manage that. Also, in our model, it means that we are able to have, in a typical 100 FTE environment, we would staff that with about 130, 140 individuals. So again, it means that if you need to bring more people in, you've got the flexibility to do that at very short notice within 30-minute intervals. And then finally, the diversity. We think the whole home working model is fantastic from a diversity of employment perspective. In our model, the only thing that matters is whether you can actually do the job or not, whether you've got the right profile, the right background, etc. Everything else is pretty much irrelevant. So we're a very broad employer, a very diverse employer. Approximately 18% of our colleagues are living with some form of registered disability. In actual fact, it's probably a lot higher than that, but we wouldn't necessarily know that because there's no reason for us to find out or for our colleagues to tell us. and it just doesn't affect their job. But clearly it means that it gives you as an employer, us as an employer, access to people regardless of their ability to get into a brick and mortar centre. And it stops that conversation around, you know, how many people have I got available within a 15, 20 mile radius of my brick and mortar contact centre. Just to further explain that, about a third of our employees come from what we call rurally disaffected areas. So rural parts of Wales, the southwest, Cornwall, Highlands and Islands of Scotland, etc. All of these people weren't previously available to us as an employee workforce, but now we've got access to this brilliant workforce, which is previously untapped. So I mentioned before that home working isn't a one-size-fits-all, and our consultancy division is really helping organisations to work out how this should look moving forward. And most businesses now, I think it's about 90% of organisations that we're talking to, are saying that home working is going to be part of their future strategy, their future model. But what does that model look like? Some of the cracks that are starting to appear at the moment are coming because what businesses have had to do is take their workforce and make them home workers or turn them into home workers. Clearly, a lot of that workforce will be starting to experience some engagement issues, motivational issues, challenges around some mental health issues, because they didn't apply for a job working from home. In our model as an outsourcer, we've got the luxury of having done that. But when we're helping businesses from a consultancy perspective, it's what model is right for them, what percentage of people should be staying working from home, who should come back into the workplace, which people are most appropriate, etc. So it's how do you operate that? Then what do the flexible shifts look like? Is it a part-time, full-time model? A key element of this will be what technology they use. We operate a bring your own device and a bring your own broadband model, but a lot of organizations are actually shipping out technology for their staff to use. There are lots of challenges inherent in that model, which is why we've decided to use bring your own device. But obviously you have to then properly staff that from an IT support desk perspective. And then there's the physicality. You know, not everybody has got a room that they can work from. Not everybody has got a secure room that they can work from. Not everybody's got a comfy desk and a comfy seat. And let's not forget that whilst we're all working from home at the moment, our regulatory and compliance challenges haven't just gone away. You know, the regulators and all of the health bodies and HR monitoring needs to keep up to speed with this. I saw it just in the press at the weekend. The health and safety executive is now issuing free Zoom calls for people to see if their home working environment is safe. And if it's not, you as an employer will have to pick up the liability of not delivering a safe workspace, even though it's a home-based workspace. So all of those factors come into play. Finally, Rob will answer questions on this later on in terms of our consultancy division, but this is how we engage with organizations. So it's about looking at all of the components of a business operation and really drilling into those and seeing how they are affected by and how they affect the home working environment. So a quick whistle-stop tour in terms of the world of home working as Sensée sees it. Happy to answer any questions of that as we move forward. I'm now going to pass back to Lee. I'll stop sharing. Thank you, Lee.
Lovely, thank you, Mark. And you've touched on so many of the different issues that I think everybody's talking about and thinking about at the moment in that slide deck, and we started to get some of the questions through already. I'd just like to say that if you are going to ask a question and we don't get to it for whatever reason, we will go through. We've got people online that are prepared and ready to answer some of those questions, and if we don't get to them still, then we will be back in touch with you directly. So Mark, please do come back, and may I also introduce Mark from Bupa, Mark Davies from Bupa, and also Rob Smale from Sensée.
Good afternoon.
Hi.
Okay, so I'm actually going to start, Mark Walton, I'm going to start with one of the questions that is directly related to the slides that you've just shared before I come back over to you, Mark, at Bupa. So Mark Walton, why do you feel that quality wasn't included in the home working poll results? Why was that not seen as an issue, do you think?
In terms of a challenge, I think I think what's really happened is that people have just been grappling with the basics. So it started off with getting telephony set up, getting technology set up. I think the quality will start to creep in, but I think people have just been trying to grapple with the basics. And I think it's not until we start to, and we've moved through the journey, that motivation starts to become a bit of an issue with some people that are working from home, and engagement. Quality, I think, becomes more visible a bit further down the line. It's just, I almost see it as just a drop down list of priorities effectively, but I'm absolutely sure that as we move forward, as home working becomes much more of a stable model and a regular model, we'll start to focus on those things. If you think about it in contact centres, I'm sure Mark will say that you've been doing this for many, many years, but we've developed some very, very sophisticated processes and management tools looking at every element of what we do in the contact centre. All of a sudden, every organisation's had to flip those in the last 3 months and get everything up and running from home. So it's a complex environment, and I do think that quality will become a much higher profile as we move forward.
Thank you, Mark. So Mark, over to you at Bupa. You first started your home working approach back in 2016 when you started working with Sensée. And I guess that through that work with Sensée, that gave you the confidence to start doing integrating home working into your own model in 2019. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? You know, what got you started in home working? I'm guessing you probably didn't have the same kind of compelling event that we've seen this year.
So I joined Bupa at the end of 2017, so just going to 3 years. And Sensée had a relationship with Bupa at that time already. I have to say, when I came in and took over the operational responsibility, I wasn't a fan of home working, to be honest. And actually, in the early months, I was contemplating bringing that relationship to an end. Now, with hindsight, looking back, I think a part of that was my ignorance of how it works. I spent 15 years previous to working at Bupa in the banking sector, ran similar sized, if not slightly bigger, operational teams. Never ran anything to do with home working, certainly for customer facing teams. And I guess looking back, I was guilty of probably not wanting to open my mind to something that I didn't think was effective. 3 years on, or far less than that, we're looking to increase our level of home working even before COVID. And as you say, at the middle of last year, I appointed a head of home working, so someone to be responsible for not just the management of the relationship that we've developed and are putting more into with Sensée, but actually to add home working to our own agenda. And I set the target for the person that took this job at the middle of last year and said, right, by the end of 2020, your stretch objective is to get 50 of our 800 colleagues working from home. And you can imagine what he's saying to me now about how he's managed to do that a little bit ahead of schedule with 800 people effectively equipped. So it's been a big shift. And I think if I probably elaborate a little bit more about why we wanted to start home working even before anything to do with the COVID impact, the real reason actually was staff engagement. And everyone I think on this meeting will have got some extent of an understanding of the customer facing roles can be really, really challenging. And certainly my time in healthcare and health insurance, the role of our frontline colleagues is very, very challenging. Speaking to customers all day who have got something effectively the matter with their health. Now, I wanted to address, I think, a challenge that my team have consistently placed with me, which is, look, we think we need to be rewarded more. And like any big organisation or any organisation, to try and justify significant pay rises for lots of people is always a difficult thing commercially. So we thought about asking our people what else we could do to try and fix the same root cause. And actually what we realised is we couldn't necessarily give cash as easily as we would ideally like, but we could give time. And when I surveyed all of my team at the beginning of last year, what came through was quite surprising for me. We have two big bricks and mortar operations in Bupa, one really big one in Manchester and a kind of satellite operation down in Staines near Heathrow Airport. And when I polled staff, I was staggered that the average commute for our Manchester-based staff was about an hour and a half each, for a round trip there and back. But for Staines down near Heathrow, over an hour on average. Some people double that. So actually, we started thinking, actually, if we can give people back time, that would be able to invest in their kind of lives and therefore improve their well-being. And that's where we started. And obviously, as we've continued to do that, we're looking to see that become a part of the feature of what we do for the future.
And so do you recognise, Mark, in that period of that migration, do you recognise some of the challenges that you're hearing people talk about today around, like you say, the rewarding performance management? Is that familiar? What's the backstory?
Yeah, absolutely. I think like every organisation that's been through it, in the early parts of COVID, which effectively accelerated deployment of home working, really accelerated it. It was what I call a bit happy clappy. Everyone was feeling pretty good about things. The sun was shining. People were really enjoying that luxury of working at home. But as time has gone on, that's really kicked in hard for a lot of our people. And I think not only our frontline colleagues that are serving customers remotely, but the teams that are managing those people as well. And we've seen that kind of manifest in various different ways. To start with, our absence rates had gone to record lows, right? And I can see some parts of the organisation were celebrating this fantastic success of absence rate that had got to a level that they're always going to be at. Over time, those absence rates have crept in, and some of that for physical reasons, I think, as Mark touched about. We've had quite a lot of MSK, musculoskeletal referral, where people are sat in desk spaces that probably haven't been risk assessed in the same way as we would have done in a BAU steady state environment. We went from almost everyone in the office to almost everyone at home. That's caused us some problems, and we're a healthcare insurer, and obviously we've got access to physiotherapists and experts, which is really beneficial. But also the mental health aspect, and we've seen people struggle with that connection. And I think that's probably the thing that I've noted most impactful is even people that can work effectively from home, right? And I'm one of those people, right? I don't have a problem with my motivation generally. I don't have a problem with connectivity in a comfy space. That connection with colleagues, I think, is a really big impact if left unacknowledged. And I think, as Mark said, people that some say have employed go in with their eyes wide open to that being their environment. And again, doesn't mean it's not a challenge for them, but it's one that people are very sighted on from day one. For us in Bupa, and I'm sure for many people on the call, going into an environment that you didn't choose is a difficult one. And I think that's got to be top of mind for all leaders, in my opinion, as we go forward, I guess, into the next phase of what comes.
Thank you, Mark. So, Rob, I'm going to ask you one of the questions that we've had coming through the Q&A. How do you keep the team motivated, engaged whilst they're working from home?
Yeah, it's a great question, and as Mark has just said, it's absolutely essential to keep people engaged. So we have both the technology and the mindset to do that. The technology is important in terms of making sure that everybody feels connected, that all our people, when they're working, can see the people they're working with and know they are present, and that also their manager, their team leader is there to support them immediately. So if they have a query, if they have a question, they get their question answered, they get the support they need immediately. There is no waiting for a response. So that connection is really important. I think the other connection is around the mindset, and I think this is where it's particularly challenging and becoming more apparent now, is the team leader population, the management population need to also have the skill and the capability to manage agents and create that connectivity. So one of it's around awareness, another aspect is empathy to the challenge, having the tools to manage that, and things, the kind of small subtle things like tone of voice. If you're engaged with an agent doing a one-to-one, etc., actually listening out for stress in their voice, their tone of voice? Are they, being quieter than normal? All those aspects of what's happening day in, day out, to understand where you need to reach out to people. And that reaching out is essential as well. So for advisors and agents, for them to be proactive, to understand it's okay to reach out for support, to ask a question, to, if we're feeling anxious, look for that extra support without feeling I'm out of the way, I'm kind of not visible, I don't want to bother anybody, etc., which just creates greater and greater professional isolation, a sense of not belonging to the company, which will lead eventually to things like mental health issues and attrition. So it's both technology and mindset, and it's about the skills of the managers in making sure that engagement and connectivity is always there. I think those are the most important lessons. The consulting work we've been doing with companies is also highlighting that is a challenge for companies who are used to a bricks and mortar environment, and the team leaders and the managers working in that environment, to actually grasp that challenge and deal with that challenge. So we are seeing kind of the replication or the mirroring of a bricks and mortar environment with the home operating model and setup, which is fine in many instances, making sure that the customer experience and the business objectives are met have to be the same. You must make sure those are happening, but then thinking about the different environment and what that means that needs to change to make sure that the agents have that support. And the thing I'd stress probably most is putting oneself in the shoes of an agent who may not have the environment that is beneficial for them, may have stresses and strains with working from home, may have a customer on the line now, and this is something we've seen a lot of recently, much more of, is that customers in those first few months were very forgiving if there was a delay, if somebody didn't know the answer, if there was a technical problem. Customers now are becoming much more demanding again, and taking that out on someone who's actually working from home in their own home environment can feel very, very uncomfortable. So those things are making it more challenging, and we need to, as managers, make sure that we're there for the agents. What is their environment? What are they feeling? What are they sensing? And how difficult is that for them? And what can we do to make sure that they are supported effectively? I think that's the key things that we're seeing and that we've learned over the years, but we're seeing in companies, as Mark says, that aren't used to home working and are seeing these challenges come to the surface.
Thank you, Rob. And there again, you touched on some of the issues that are coming through on the questions, and we will come back to the health and safety and home workspace questions shortly. But one of the questions that's coming up a few times is around performance management. And the question I'm gonna ask, and Mark at Bupa, if I can come to you on this one, and then back to you, Mark Walton. What's your preferred management approach to addressing underperformance, particularly with those new to working from home and where you don't have all of the tools that you'd normally have in the office, such as wall boards? So how do you literally go about doing performance management? Mark at Bupa.
Yeah, it's a really tough area. A few things. I think I have a kind of way of thinking that I like to instill in the teams, which is don't blame the people, blame the processes, right? So like a lot of organizations, Bupa has seen some impact on our, what I call classic advisor productivity metrics. And if you take a big step back, as I've encouraged our broader organization to do, that is 100% natural, right? Customer facing teams tend to have a real double edge of a challenge and an opportunity that they get more measured than any other area of the business. And as I was explaining to our executive committee last week, the fact is we can measure performance of our customer facing staff far better and far more to the hour than we can maybe our central marketing team. So it naturally, what gets measured then can often get managed. And I think what we have to do is realize that we're in a different environment. we probably lost 5% of productivity, and probably still have 3% of that through the fact that we've got lots of local distributed networks relying upon local Wi-Fi connections as opposed to centralized issues. That requires and will impact people's connectivity throughout the day. So that's going to have an impact straight away. I've absolutely seen that the conversation that we have with customers, whether it's on a web chat, whether that's over the phone, across every single team that I manage, has added at least 10%, because guess what? Customers who are real people living real lives want to have a conversation with someone, certainly in my business, around the empathetic build, the rapport build. Yeah. So how are you today? Yeah, well, I'm having a bit of a difficult time. I've had to, take my kids to school, but one of them is being self-isolated because of the class club. Straight away, that adds time. Equally then, specific to the industry that you're in, a lot of my customers want to talk about what's covered and what's not covered in their policy. Do they need to wear PPE if they go and see a hospital provider? All of those things add time. And as everyone, I'm sure, will appreciate, you add 10% of time to how long it takes to serve a customer. You actually then reduce the number of customers that you can help in that any given point in time. And I think what it's really important, I think, for the customer facing areas of the business, customer services, operations, is to be able to articulate that to stakeholders that aren't necessarily as clued into that. So you don't jump to the reaction, which is, oh my goodness, what a bad job you're doing, your productivity's dropped. Actually, no, there are other things here. And I think what I've tried to do then, translating that to my advisors, is really try and encourage our people in the same way as I would do in the office. When we have customers queuing, and unfortunately we've had increasing customers queuing, like a lot of businesses, you can only help the person in front of you virtually, right? Don't worry about the queues, don't worry about rushing through, give the best service that you can possibly do, and worry about the customer in front of you. And in many ways, I think what we've tried to do is strip back on the things that we would assess as someone's performance contribution to the things that matter most. Did you help the customer? Did you give them a good outcome? Do you know what? Some of the things that are the nice to do's, what I call the showing the workings as opposed to getting the right answer, aren't as important in the here and the now, right? And I think that's the bit that I think sometimes organizations struggle making the trade-off. And I've been very clear with my team, try and help every customer as best you can, but actually try and then get to the next, especially if we've got customers queuing, but then take the pressure off what you're expecting the front line and their managers to do. Yeah, and I say it's not quite as easy as that, and it's difficult because people do focus on it, but I think we're going to be reinforcing that and giving people the air cover to do what is a very, very difficult job, as Rob absolutely articulated in this environment.
Thank you, Mark. Mark, what do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, where do you start? And I think in some respects, it's fantastic working with an organisation like Bupa, because probably the first thing I would say is focus on the important things, which is the customer experience. Across the board, every single organisation that we work with, both ourselves that we're delivering for and the consultancy clients, every organisation has seen AHT increase. So stop focusing on AHT, if I could say one specific thing, and focus on the things that matter. I think in some respects we come at this from the other end, which is we've built the model with this in mind. So what we like to think is we've got a best practice model for that. And so in terms of managing underperformance, from our perspective, it's a question of managing all of the same things, but in a different way. So in our model, we take that virtual mindset. We recruit the people that have an understanding and an empathy of how this is delivered. And then I think it's about giving the managers and the advisors the empowerment to do the right things, to manage the right behaviours, to ultimately, what's it about? It's about solving problems as quickly as possible. It's about giving as good a customer experience as possible. And if you allow the managers, the advisors, team managers, the scope and scale to do that in the right way, often they really can do that. So I think that's the first thing I'd say. It's a real people issue, but people working from home need to understand it's a virtual mindset. It's a different way of managing. So I think that's the first thing I would say. The second is it's about the technologies. So in our world, we've created and we roll out a virtual contact centre platform that does enable our advisors to see and communicate with their team managers instantly if they need to, so they can see them, they're listening into them, they've still got access to floor walkers, they can still put their virtual hand up, they can still through the technology platform speak across the desk and ask their colleagues questions, and then all of the floor walker questions that are responded to feed into that central repository, so people have got access to more information, or at least as much as they would have if they were in a brick and mortar environment. So I think it's a focus less on underperformance in terms of specific metrics and more about outcomes in terms of customer experience, and then the people and the technology to help our advisors to deliver that. So, you know, ultimately it's all about carrot, and more carrot and less stick, ultimately, I suppose, is the way I would see that. Yeah.
Thank you, Mark. So I'm going to move on to, we've still got quite a lot of questions to go. So Rob, I'm going to move on to you. If you can quickly give us some tips with regard to the health and safety aspects and the workspace at home. It's one of the things that's coming out quite a lot. How do you make sure that you are meeting your legal responsibility with your home working space?
Yeah, again, echoing the points made earlier, we have the advantage that we recruit people who want to work from home, and therefore we can set up criteria that make sure that they have the right environment to work from. So when we're recruiting people, one, we point out what home working is all about before they join, that make sure that they understand the challenges, what's required, etc. And then throughout the process, we're checking to make sure that they've got the right setup before they join, during training, and ongoing. We do audits and checks, etc., just to make sure that everything's okay. And when we talk about everything being okay for us, and this isn't the same for everybody who's been forced into home working, just to be clear again, but from our point of view, it is about, for example, having a secluded office space that is personal to you, so that you don't have people walking past potentially looking at data, so that, you know, there's information security as well as health and safety in mind here. So it's looking at the room, it's making sure through webcam that we check the room, we check the desk, the chair, the actual equipment itself, the wiring. We have a policy of no laptop because we have concerns about people walking around with a laptop from a personal safety point of view, for example, and it has to be, it's no laptop and it's no wireless on for similar reasons. And when we are talking with our team leaders, spend a lot of time talking to the agents, they're always double checking on the environment, the physical environment, making sure it's still safe, and also the human side, the person. Again, going back to what we talked about before, the well-being, the health, and the mental health of the individual. So there's those aspects of what we do. We also do quite a lot of social engagement. So it's not just about the work environment and when they're working for us, but also making sure that we communicate health and the fitness side of things. We have communities and clubs. We have a cycling club, we have a running club, we have all sorts of activities that people can come together, not physically, but virtually share stories, share stats and targets, etc. So that on a social basis, we're trying to keep people fit and healthy as well. And also and Mark pointed out that we have quite a few people from rural areas and disability groups. So we also take very seriously the community side of things, that for some people, they can't leave their home. So we can create social groups. You know, we have a Christmas party, we have a summer ball equivalent, where people come together, again, virtually, who may not be able to attend those things under other circumstances, people living in very rural communities. It creates a different social mix for them. So whether it's physical health and safety, making sure their environment's okay, or the sort of well-being, the social side of things. We think of all of those aspects throughout the journey, the life cycle of the agent. Absolutely critical. Again, I just want to stress, obviously, we do have that advantage of employing people who want to be home workers. So that really helps us. Some of the work we're doing with our clients from the consultancy piece, though, is to say, okay, that is an advantage for us, but can you recreate that model office for yourselves where you will be in future recruiting into this model office, and then give the choice of existing agents the ability to transition across to that model office. So just because of the current environment and the challenges of the current environment doesn't mean you can't look long-term strategically at what your model office could look like and start to put the steps in place to get there. And that's the kind of work we're doing with our clients at the moment.
Thank you, Rob. Mark at Bupa, I've got a specific question that's come in for you. On engagement and connectivity, have Bupa increased planned offline time for colleagues in comparison from being in an office-based environment?
Yeah, we have. We've absolutely done that throughout the kind of start of lockdown. But we've done a few more things in addition to that. So again, this was started out with the kind of COVID impacts, but you know, I'm a very big believer, as is the organisation that I work for, in wellness, whether that's physical and mental wellness. And we initiated a programme of work last year to improve the workplace wellness of our colleagues across the customer-facing teams, on the basis that actually it can be quite a sedentary job, and clearly lots of cause and effect with a lack of physical activity and illness and wellness, whether that's physical or mental. And again, as I've said before, the nature of the work that my teams do will typically be speaking to 30 to 40 different customers every day who could have something wrong with them mentally or physically on every single one of those conversations. And you know, not all of my team, in fact the vast majority, aren't clinically trained. There are some that are, but a lot of them aren't. And actually that supervision that you get in a clinical environment, you don't get in a non-clinical. So we started something that we've really upped the ante on through the lockdown, which is trying to create what I call daily habits. So we have a company that we partnered with, very small local company to our Salford Quays office in Manchester, that have helped us try and ingrain an operating rhythm that can be ran and led by any of our managers or even colleagues, just to try and get people physically active. And even if it's as simple as just standing up every 10 minutes, 15 minutes that you're there, doing some basic stretches, maybe some competitions, some challenges, some step challenges between teams. And obviously we use the Teams facilities and the various different social medias that we've got to connect. But I think it's done a number of things for us. It's helped us create a real focus and awareness on the correlation between wellness and how that helps to kind of de-stress our people, but also now we're not in the office as much. We've still got some people that are in the office by choice. It's created that connectivity between colleagues, which I think is the vital thing that people miss. I think the final thing that we've done on that is, as much as we moved everyone to have the ability to work from home, we have around about 20% of our in-house colleagues that are in the office for the majority of their time. And as I touched upon maybe briefly before, our default was that trust everyone can be effective and productive from home, right? And work backwards from that. And we found over that time that not everyone can. Some people can't be productive for reasons that are very, very easy to understand. And I think Mark and Rob have touched upon it. You might not have a workspace, right? You might have a secure workspace to have a conversation with a customer. Some people's connectivity has been really, really poor, and even if we've tried to provide them with dongles and so on, it's maybe not happened. And let's face it, we have some people that require greater supervision than we would like to give them. right? And any organisation that says they haven't got those people, I'd say are fibbing, having worked for a few. So some people, we removed that choice, and we insisted that they came into the office. We made sure, of course, to do this, we had a very safe environment, and we're very, very blessed, I think, in Bupa that, you know, I'm incredibly impressed and proud about how the buildings have been COVID secure. I've been in a good number of times over the past few months, and we've done a really good job of that. And reassuring people that it's safe to come in is the first thing. But actually, even those people that absolutely can work from home, who have just struggled with that kind of isolation, we've enabled those people to come back in part of the week. Even now, even with the local restrictions and the local lockdowns, and Manchester is one of the biggest affected areas, because those people have a place to work and we've supported them to do that, they're able to come in. So a whole suite of things, I think, that we've focused on. No silver bullets, and by any means, I'm not saying we've got it perfectly right, but I think it's really important to say that it's a top focus certainly for me and my senior leadership team.
Thank you, Mark. And Mark Walton, if I can come to you, one of the things that is coming out through the questioning is around recruitment and training. And actually it also potentially lends itself to a question around whether organisations are having to increase staffing in order to meet SLAs because of the increased interactions. So Mark Walton, from your perspective, how do you recruit? You know, what's different recruiting into a home working environment? And then how do you onboard them and train them when they're not coming into the office?
Yeah, I think that's a question we get asked an awful lot, as you can imagine. I think, again, Rob pointed out earlier on that we've had the luxury of everybody that we recruit into our business is applying for a work from home role. So it's quite difficult, I think, for a lot of organisations at the moment who are perhaps selecting or trying to select which of those people, as opposed to straightforward recruitment. I think, interestingly, the other thing that I would say is that most organisations have been saying to us that they've not had to do any recruitment because there's been no attrition. So there's been virtually no attrition through lockdown. That said, that's starting to creep back in now. And then certain sectors are having to recruit, particularly in insurance, and particularly where organisations are affected because increased average handling time means you need more people. So all of that said, the way that we do that is, again, back to that point about you've got to have a virtual mindset. So in our world, we had to develop a technology platform to do it because it didn't really exist before. So we've developed a suite of products that we use to help us with virtual recruitment, and we recruit entirely across the UK and Ireland. So there are no restrictions on that. What it does mean is that you have to spend a lot more time actually with each recruit. So you effectively, in our world, have about 5 or 6 different interactions with each individual, because you're not just recruiting the person, and you've got to make sure that the job's right for the person and that they're right for you, but you're also recruiting their technology, so their desktop, their broadband, their connectivity, and as Rob said, you're recruiting their physical office. So have they got a comfortable desk and seat? Have they got a secure office? Is there a window overlooking the screen? Because if there is, it doesn't meet with data security rules, etc., etc. So it's a very in-depth process, and we have created that process over a long period of time. Technology helps a lot. If anybody is interested, they can go and have a look on our website at the recruitment page. We've automated and gamified about the first 2 hours of that entire process. And that obviously saves us a lot of time, but it's also really good, I think, for each individual coming into the business, because it gives them a chance to really, truly understand what home working is like. You go back a year ago, you'd asked anybody in an office contact centre who wants to work from home, pretty much everybody would have put their hand up. But the reality is actually very different. You know, there are challenges that we've all talked about and we all know about. So we've gamified that process so people can take themselves through the challenges, the reality, expectation, are they the right sort of personality characteristics profile to do that. And it's quite good fun, and the advisors get something at the end of that, and it's a two-way process. So I think that's the first thing I would say. We use technology very heavily to do that. Secondly, It's about making sure you take people through. It's not just a one come into the contact centre, have your interview, and then you're in or out. In our world, it's a sort of a 5-step process, which is very, very important. The overriding thing I would say to all of this is it's about appropriateness. So not all the people are appropriate for home working, and it won't suit them and they won't suit it. And I think you have to really make that realization and get to that point, because there's no point getting somebody into a job that isn't going to suit them and they're not going to enjoy ultimately. If you do get it right, and we do most of the time, it means that we have very low staff attrition. And I think it's about that. It's about appropriateness, whether you're selecting your existing employees for home working or recruiting new ones. And then there's obviously, once you've identified those individuals, we use technology very heavily to bring them in, because in our world, all of the training process and all of the onboarding process is, again, an entirely virtual one. So technology heavy, but with the right mindset. It's very difficult using the same HR and recruitment teams to then suddenly flip into recruiting and onboarding home workers, because it is a different process. A different series of skill sets.
Thank you, Mark. And Mark, at Bupa, if I can come back to you for a question that's on the stream. How do you make sure that within a business where you still have office workers and home workers, that you ensure that the home workers have the same opportunities, for example, development, incentives, and that they're not left out? Do you have any examples?
I have the opposite problem. I have the people who are in the office saying, why are we left out when everyone else is treated differently? Because I've got the vast majority of people now working remotely, pretty much all of the time. So I think whether it's either way, I think it's still a fair challenge. I think what we have to continue to do is to make opportunities available, agnostic of where someone is working. And it's back to a point I made earlier on. I am very fortunate, I think, in Bupa that I've been given full autonomy to decide how we use the offices. I could have probably made a pitch if I wanted to say, you know what, we've got offices that are COVID secure. I could have insisted people went into those offices around government guidelines, and everyone would have worked in the office, and everyone would have worked a little bit out of the office, because obviously we have fewer seats now available because of the social distancing rules. But I started, as I mean to go on, which is you give people the choice, right? So people effectively earn the right to choose, right, if they can be effective. And I think with that, there comes a level of personal accountability for how people engage. Our managers have also shared the load, if you like, of rotating into the office. So I've asked all my managers to do just a day a week as a minimum, where they go into the office and they have a leadership presence. Again, that's helped us create that connectivity for our colleagues. At the very, very start, when we only had people in the office that literally could not and would not work at home, I didn't have any managers in, right? Probably for the first 6 weeks. Yeah, and I wasn't in a place where I wanted to insist managers went in, because it broke my principle of giving people choice. What I realized in that time is that that's where people started to feel disconnected, right? They felt they were treated differently because they were effectively in the office without that supervision. Although people at home didn't have the physical supervision, it felt different. So I think over time, what we've tried to do is to say, look, everyone has got a choice, right? Managers have been encouraged to really think about how they treat people agnostic, whether they're in the office, whether they're out the office. And actually, it seemed to work really well. I don't get quite as much challenge on that as I did certainly in the early parts of the lockdown.
Thank you, Mark. Rob, if I can come to you on that PCI and compliance piece. And I guess much of what we've talked about today has been looking at that flexible model, some in the office, some not in the office, but those that are working from home, whether it's 100% home working or not, you've still got PCI compliance, you've got customer data that could be visible. What is it that you've done at Sensée to make sure that you're able to meet those compliance needs, those regulatory needs?
Yeah, absolutely. So Putting in context as well, 70% plus of our customers, clients are FCA regulated, and none of them would work with us if they didn't trust the information security we have in place. So it's absolutely the bar that we have to meet. Now, the way we've done that is in many ways. From a technology point of view, we have information security processes and systems in place that make sure that, in essence, when an agent is working for us, their PC is locked down to a degree that whether it's whitelisting and blacklisting, they can only work when they're scheduled to work. If they press print screen, a team leader will get an alert that they pressed print screen or copy paste. If they go wireless, again, we get an alert. So their system is very much locked down to the point where it's very secure. We do have the option to use webcam when we want. That's agreed as part of the employee handbook. So if we have concerns about an agent, we can ask them to turn their webcam on and demonstrate, for example, a clear desk. We have a clear desk policy, no mobile phone in the office, aspects like that. The biggest thing, though, really is around the person themselves. When we're recruiting people, and our demographic is very different than an average contact centre. You know, the average age of a person who works for us is 40. And I believe that creates a different type of approach to accountability, responsibility, and different types of conversation between manager and employee. So when we employ someone, we highlight the fact that information security is critical. Our clients won't work with us if that's not present, and that we need them to understand that, and they need to trust us, and we need to trust them. So we train and educate them and make them aware so that they buy into the same objectives we have. Even to the point, as Mark said earlier, that we don't allow people to have an office with a window on facing the street so people can't look over their shoulder. So down to the very finest detail, we make sure that the chance of something happening is absolutely minimalized. And we have a very strict zero tolerance on that, because again, if we are found to be wanting, then in the world we live in, then that can lead to very serious repercussions to our business, obviously, and also our clients' business. So absolutely paramount.
Thank you, Rob. Mark at Bupa, if I can come back to you with regard to some of the feedback that you've had, where obviously you're already familiar with the home working model, but where you've had to then move other colleagues into home working. How have you been dealing with some of the reactions that you've had from them in going into that new environment quite quickly?
Yeah, great question. I think in the main, it's been very positive, and I'll explain why. There are always outliers, of course, but they are by exception. I think a couple of things have really helped us. So having that long-established relationship with Sensée, who I think I should say started, certainly in my mind when I came in, started as an outsourced supplier, and now I consider them a partner, right? And I think that whether it's a member of staff from Sensée or a member of staff from my own team, I think about them all the same in the serving our customers, and I think that's really helped. And I think the relationship that we've developed over time, and it has been developed since I started, certainly, has enabled us to really leverage some of the best practices in how to work remotely, right? So we did have a bit of an acceleration compared to a lot of organisations that went in really cold. If I look at some of my previous organisations, I'd have gone in completely cold, right? We have, nearly 10% of our colleague base that are represented by the Sensée team. So we leverage some really best practice techniques, because the way that I think about it is our core competence in Bupa is healthcare and insurance. It's not remote working. Sensée's core competence is enabling remote working, among other things, but it's the bit that I purchase from them to help us, right, serve our customers. So we've really listened to how they've basically guided us to how we set things up, and that helped us accelerate our deployment of our own home working, exponentially. I think we had literally from 20 people set up to work from home to the 800 in about 12 weeks, and over half of that was probably done in 4 weeks. We'd have never have done that if we didn't have that relationship. So for me, my guidance would be, listen to people that are expert. Don't think that you know best just because you might be experienced in customer service or operations management, like I consider myself, because it's a very, very specific way of working. And I think that's probably I think the biggest thing that's helped us actually get to this point quickly.
Thank you, Mark. And Mark Walton, if I can come back to you on the question of culture. I think organisations doing this move, there's some home working. Is it always going to be home working? Are they going to be coming back into the office? But I think that the contact centre leaders that are monitoring this are really aware of culture. One of the questions in the feed is, how do you get that camaraderie that you're so used to in a bricks and mortar environment? Now, tell us more about the culture at Sensée, and how do you create that kind of culture, or is it just a completely different way of working?
Yeah, so I think this is it's a massive topic, and we've got people focusing on this all of the time because it's so important. I think for me, it starts with the kind of people we bring into our business. So it starts with the people, making sure it's back to that issue around appropriateness. Now, again, I know that doesn't help out in a COVID situation because most people have had to been forced into that. But then beyond that, it's about communication. Most of the people within our organisation really understand what we're doing. They understand from our own perspective as Sensée, but they also understand and are totally bought into what they're doing on behalf of the brands they work on. So, if you speak to any of our people that work for Mark on Bupa, they're so committed to Bupa. Healthcare is their thing. So it's a little bit of a Jekyll and Hyde in our outsourced environment. But that just means we have to work harder to make it work. And I think the absolute key there is communication. So we've got a mantra which is overcompensate and over-communicate, which is what we do. And we use technology really heavily to help us to do that. So when we got into this as a business some 16 odd years ago, the technology just didn't exist. So we had to build this thing that we call Live Desk, which is our unified communication tool. So yes, people working from home, they've got Teams and they've got Zoom, but that's a really tiny part. That enables us to do this. It enables us to do what we're doing now. Over and above that, what we've done is created a model that enables each employee, each customer service facing individual to work in exactly the same way, whether they're in the office or whether they're not in the office. So it's the same experience, because I mentioned it earlier on, but you want to be able to talk to your team manager when you want to talk to them. You want to be able to look over the desk and shout at your colleagues and ask them if they've had an experience of that particular issue, and capture all the feedback about, what are the answers to that. So make it really feel like it's an inclusive workplace. So the hundreds of issues in terms of the steps of bringing people in and taking them through and getting them up to speed. But once they're in, I think it's that communication, and it really is enabling that to happen. And it's not just about the customer facing stuff. It's about, remember, when people are working from home, they switch off their Zoom meeting, that's it, they're gone. In a workforce environment, actually in a brick and mortar environment, they're not, because they're going, making a cup of tea, they're going to have a drink after work, they're putting their coat on, they're chatting to their colleagues. So it's using a technology platform to enable that to happen as well. And we work really hard in terms of virtual, and it comes back to the sort of giving team leaders as well a lot of flexibility to do this, what's best for their teams. But a lot of virtual quiz nights, pub nights, as Rob said, groups, walking the dog groups, cycling groups, all of this stuff. We do everything virtually. So it's about putting as much effort into all of that culture building and engagement building virtually. And I think because it's virtual, you do have to work harder at it.
Thank you, Mark. So in a moment, I'm going to come to each of you for your top tip for just thinking about all of the challenges that organisations are going through at the moment with regard to home working. So I should in a moment come to you, but I just really want to say thank you so much for all the questions that we've had in. We have got a lot of questions that we haven't yet been able to get to, but all of those questions that are on the feed, we will be answering them, and we will come back to you with the answers. There's a number of ways that we can do that, but please rest assured that your questions will be answered. So I'm going to start with you, Rob. What's your top tip for those that are going through this home working challenge right now?
Yeah, again, as I mentioned earlier, I would say put yourself in the shoes of the agent and an advisor, and understand the impact of home working on them, and then look at your technologies, your process, your performance management, your communication, your engagement elements, to understand how you can make a better environment for them so they can perform, they are motivated, they can deliver for your customers the best customer experience possible. So I think you have to look at it holistically, but it's a good place to start to make sure that the most important people are the people who deliver the service. How can you make sure that they've got the tools and the support to be able to do that effectively?
Thank you, Rob. Mark at Bupa, if I could come to you next, what's your top tip?
Sure. So I think the top tip is make colleague connection and engagement the most important thing all the way through the management hierarchy in the customer facing teams, right? Everything else, I think, will look after itself or not. It'll be what it'll be. You know, people are the greatest competitive advantage, in my opinion, of any customer service operation. And the best, I'm visualizing now who I perceive the best leader in my department through this environment, and the modus operandi they have is they connect with their team, their front-facing team, every single day for 5 to 10 minutes on a personal chat basis that they wouldn't have in their diary necessarily, but they would probably do naturally if they were in the office because they could go and see them. But they make that habitual. Now, some people started it. Some people pick that habit up later on. Very few have made that sustainable. And for me, that little bit of effort will pay back in spades. And I think that will give a much better gauge about how your people are when you can't read the non-verbal signs or even the two-dimensional signs that we can see on a screen. So that'll be my big tip.
Thank you, Mark. And your final tip, please, Mark Walton.
They've stolen all my final tips. But what I would say was, and you'd expect me to say, is, and you have to get a sales plug-in, but you have to work with a specialist who knows what they're doing. So I think, you know, if there's anything we can do to help, please do let us know. But I think over and above that, probably two key things is, especially if you've had to move into a home working environment and it isn't your usual way of working, is don't try and do it all at once. Focus on the core things that matter. And I think Mark stressed it very well, it is focus on what matters to the customer, and some of those other metrics may have to slide. And finally, I mentioned it before, but it is overcompensate and over-communicate. I can't stress that enough.
Thank you, Mark. And thank you, gentlemen, for joining us today. Mark at Bupa, Rob and Mark Walton at Sensée. Thank you very much. And as I say, all of the questions that have been asked, we will answer them and come back to everybody. So thank you very much for joining us for this session today. And we hope you have a lovely rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.